when we're stuck in an autopilot and overdrive or anxiety activation, stress state, we don't have access to our full capability of problem solving and all the things. So the more space and time that I claim for myself makes me a better mom, makes me more productive. If I'm not carving in that time, I'm not going to be as efficient and productive in my work.
Are you at a crossroads in your career? Ready for a change, but you're not sure how to get there? Don't worry, we are about to produce your best life together. Welcome to the Second Act Success podcast. I am your host, Shannon Russell. I am a former television producer turned boy mom. I left my dream job to find family balance, and in doing so, I produced my dream life. Now I am a business owner, podcaster, and career coach. My mission is to help other women like you find what they are truly meant to be doing. If you are ready to start over in your career or pivot to a new purpose, then get ready to be inspired by stories of women who have done just that. We will share advice and actionable tips to motivate you as you move along on your path. It is time to shine, so let's start producing your balanced life of abundance today. This is Second Act Success. Have you ever been in a work situation where you felt so much stress and pressure that it made you physically ill? Welcome to episode number 60 of the Second Act Success podcast. I'm Shannon Russell. My guest today is Sara Vatore. Sara began her career as a high school guidance counselor. She loved the impact she was having on her students, but the stress of dealing with families, letters of recommendation, and fielding issues all day long led her to fall ill. The stress was too overwhelming, and she started to try to figure out what was happening to her body. In doing so, Sara discovered somatic therapy, which is body-centered therapy studying the alignment of the mind and the body. She was hooked and dove into becoming a somatic practitioner and a peak performance coach. Sara has her hand in so many things, and we had the best conversation. Let me introduce you to Sara Vatore. Sara, hello. Welcome to the podcast.
That's so great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Your story is so amazing. I'd love to just start from the beginning. Do you want to tell me about life from college on?
Sure. Yeah, I got pregnant my senior year in college, actually. And at a good time in the year, I was able to graduate and then have my son in October. And so the vision I had had for myself dramatically shifted and changed as I stepped into motherhood at age 23. And so I
In the real world at the same time.
100%. 100%. I was a preschool teacher. I did some different things and then realized I got interested in guidance counseling, and I always had helped people and really liked being always the person that friends came to for advice. And so as I learned what a guidance counselor was, I felt really interested in that avenue. And in my family, there was really a projected out course. You got A's, you went to college, you get a degree, you get another degree, you get more degrees, you get married, then you have kids. And so I interrupted everything. So in my conditioning, it was like I had to get my master's. And so that was sort of why I did it. I was interested in the field, but it was more really coming from a place of, oh, I'm supposed to do this. My master's is in education with a focus in school counseling. I found a program that I could do nights and weekends, and I was a single mom for a big chunk of it before I met my husband when my son was 3. So it was just more of, there wasn't ever a question that was going to happen.
Yeah.
I just had to wait until birth was over and I was in a different kind of place to be able to go back to school and do that.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so I did.
Were you working at the time of getting your master's?
Yeah. So I stopped working in preschools because it was really burning me out. And I got sort of like a really fun job managing a Danish clothing and jewelry store in my area. And so it was low stress and really fun. And the owners were super nice. And I was able to do school and be a mom and work and have what I needed to have coming in order to make it all work.
And then you became a high school guidance counselor?
So I stepped into that and it was like week 1 and I had an oh no moment where I was not prepared at all for the system. So I was very excited about the work and what I was going to be doing, but nowhere in my training had I learned sort of the politics of schools and how the dynamics work. And being a guidance counselor is a really interesting position because you're on a teacher contract. You're the same as a teacher, but you work very closely with administration and you hold a lot of confidentiality pieces. So it's a very interesting place to be in navigating parent dynamics and navigating teachers and students and holding all of that. And and it was exhausting.
You probably wanted to help people, but it was more of like the politics and the system. And I have a friend who's a high school guidance counselor, and she just left her job
Yeah.
because she felt like she couldn't help the kids. And her biggest fear was leaving because she knew there had been such turnaround before her
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
that the poor kids were the ones who were going to be stuck in limbo. But there was just too much
Yeah.
going on that it wasn't as much about helping.
Absolutely, and I have so much gratitude and appreciation for people that work in schools because it takes such a special kind of capacity because there's so much that's expected of you. And I mean, I was getting in at like 6 o'clock in the morning and I was staying until 4 o'clock in the afternoon. I had a caseload of 250 students, and a quarter of those were seniors that I was writing letters of recommendation for on my own time. And so it was, I'd come home and then I'd be working. And this was also just me. I wasn't able at that point. I hadn't done a lot of my somatic training and a lot of like my body awareness stuff. I wasn't setting boundaries. I wasn't able to stop. My perfectionist took over. And in
Mhm.
order to do a good job, there was no stopping because if I didn't answer emails at night, I'd go into work with a 50 email to respond to. And so I found a way to work around it, which was I worked all the time.
To the detriment of your son and your husband at that point, I'm sure.
And really, my
Mhm.
body really started to rebel, and I always was a person and kid who got a lot of weird things and was sick a lot as a kid, and my body was just flaring up in all sorts of ways with autoimmune issues, and I mean, lots of people have a similar story when we're overriding our needs and we're overriding what our body is asking of us, it starts to get really loud. And that was what was happening for me in lots of very bizarre, intense ways.
Hey, it's Shannon. If you are enjoying this podcast, then you will love my weekly newsletter. It's full of career advice, productivity tips, and of course, inspiring stories of women who have launched a new career that they love. Just go to secondactsuccess.co to sign up. Plus, you'll get the My Success Vision Board to help you with your 2023 planning as well. Now, it's back to the episode. Well, I'm glad that you were able to listen to your body because so many times we can be in that fast paced world and not listen. And I'm
Yeah.
someone who has an autoimmune issue as well. And
Yeah.
it's suppressed for the most part. But when I don't take care of myself, that's when it flares. So I'm
Yeah.
sure that's kind of what you were going through at that time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what ended up happening was I started to do a somatic experiencing training, which is the foundation of my work. It's looking at our bodies and our mammalian biology and how we have survival responses. And when I started to do that training, I realized how shut down I had been and how disconnected I had been from my body, and that I had no sense of my nervous system. It was in complete overdrive, and I was always in overwhelm, and I was always in sort of this high doing, and I was very shut down, but I was an overactive shutdown, right?
Yeah.
So I'm just always doing and always in urgency energy and not being able to sleep really well. And this training for me was just like I got whammed over the head. It was like, "Oh my god, what am I
So
doing to myself?"
when did you discover somatic experiencing and kind of start delving into that world?
My father is an internationally known sports performance consultant, and so he works a lot with athletes who have fears or blocks. And a component of his work, he did the somatic experiencing training because there was a percentage of athletes he just wasn't able to get to that had a high level of trauma. So a lot of gymnasts, divers, equestrians, sports that have accident that happen and then stuff gets stuck in the body. So he found somatic experiencing training and went through it and started to implement it in his work. And really, it was like that first year in the school when I was like, oh my gosh, what did I do? And he said, why don't you take the training and then come work with me? But the training's 3 years. It's a very extensive
Wow.
process. And so I was able to work in tandem and go through the training, which really served my work in the school, and then have sort of this vision, dream of leaving at some point to have my own business.
Just knowing that you had that dream and that the end was in sight probably helped you day to day during the
Yeah.
stress.
Oh, absolutely. Like really being able to have that vision and be able to move towards that gives a why to getting up and continuing to sort of push through. But I remember the moment I was like up at, it was like 1 o'clock in the morning. I was on like my 60th letter of recommendation or something in February. And I was like, what am I doing? If I put all this time and attention into my own self and my own work, like I really could do this. I am a very dedicated person when I put my mind to something. So why not for me and something that's really going to generate my health and wellness and my family's health and wellness versus into a machine, which feels really sad to say because schools are so important and there are such good people who are doing the work, but I could not do it anymore at the expense of myself.
That's a big awakening and a big light bulb moment, like you said. So you're not giving it up to do something selfish. Yeah, you're working towards helping other people in a different way.
And one of the things that I did as I was preparing to leave was learn about other kinds of credentials because, it's in my family. You gotta have the credentials. So I started to look into coaching, and there's a couple of different accreditation, ICF and the board certified coaching program. And so I ended up finding an amazing training right down the street from where I live in a holistic psychology called psychosynthesis, which really looks at our needs and wants and desires and how we're wired and our higher self and all of these different aspects of being human. And so the somatic experiencing training for me was like, oh, I have this body that I'm not listening to. And then the psychosynthesis for me was like, wow, I have like my own opinion and needs and desires on things. Like I really grew up in a way where it was the right way and the wrong way. It was super black and white, very concrete based on society and my family. And I didn't have my own thoughts or choices. Really, having my son was the first choice that I made on my own because my parents really didn't want me to make that choice. And so that was really that first split of like, oh, I can think differently than other people. And that's okay. And I'm not going to die because I have a different belief than my parents. It's like a huge separation at that point when we're in our late teens and early 20s. So the psychosynthesis was that moment then where it was really clear I had to leave and take medical leave and attune to what was going on in my body. And that was after 5 years of being at the school.
Wow. So you finished earlier than you thought you would have because your body was telling you this was the time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think over the years I had been wanting, like there had been desires to leave, but there's that fear. Like, what am I going to do for money? And I'm bringing in half our income, and health insurance through school is really, really sweet,
Mhm.
really
Yeah,
good
I've
deal.
heard.
All of those components. And so it really was diving into a trust that it was going to work.
And that's part of being an entrepreneur, really, is stepping out there and kind of believing in yourself more than anybody else because you're the one who's going to make it come to fruition. So, how was your health when you stepped out on your own and you left your guidance counselor office?
Yeah.
How did your health change after that?
Yeah. I went through a period of finally getting to go to doctors, finally being able to sort of sort through what was actually happening in my system. And that brought me into sort of this whole other journey of, every doctor sees body parts separate, no one's working together. I had lots of different kinds of diagnoses from lots of different people. But I was able to create the space, and my kids were in school at the time. I was able to go to appointments and make the time for myself, to be able to sit outside and relax and start to learn. Like, I started to color, I started to play with oracle cards and like tap into things that were exciting and fun because I had never thought about anything other than like what I had to do. I noticed there were seasons. It was amazing. And started to communicate with animals and notice things that I just like hadn't before. And so that sort of supported the breaking down that my body was going through, but I could drink water all day. I mean, I couldn't get to pee when I
Yeah.
was working in the school. So I could drink water, I could cook healthy meals for myself. Caring for ourselves takes energy and capacity. I think a lot of people beat themselves up because they're not caring for themselves or they're with bad habits or they're not able to exercise. And
Mm.
so all of a sudden I had space. And that really sort of led to this development of my business that really lights me up. The Soma Synthesis Studios, which is my spaces for healing, integration, and expansion. We have to have the space, we have to claim the space before any of this can happen.
And you did that. You cleaned the space for yourself to kind of come up with these ideas of what you were going to do next. Was that the time where you came up with your business and really what you wanted it to be?
Mhm. Such a great question. I'm in my 6th year of business, completed my 5th year of business, and I'm in the 6th year. And it's been very interesting to watch my journey because I started by doing mostly working with athletes because that's where the referrals are coming in. I was very blessed to be so connected to my dad and to be able to, I just immediately had clients.
Mhm.
So sports clients were coming in, and then someone in my psychosynthesis training was starting a psychosynthesis training in California. I live in Massachusetts. And so she asked for my support. She was my mentor at the time. And I worked on that project with her and helped her establish that coaching program there. And I'm often guest faculty. I do somatic work with new rising coaches to learn about the body and how to hold space and those things. So that was a project I stepped into right away that felt like super in alignment. And then the sports stuff was very good at, and it was just coming in easy. Really, what ended up happening was I spent the first 2 years of business saying yes to everything. People saw my worth and I was like, "Wow, okay, sure, I'll do this. I'll do that." I mean, I took a dance teacher training at the time, this modality called Nia, which was just feeding my soul, but I started teaching it. I just was doing too much. It was like the first 2 years I said yes to everything, and then I had a, "Uh-oh, what am I doing?" It was the same pattern. I found myself filling the space in the very same way that I was when I was guidance counseling, and my body started to rebel again. And
Ah,
so I just had like really important moments around, okay, what's really mine? I was very good at helping other people. I was helping everybody else's passion projects and not really taking the space for, okay, like what is my work in this? Because the sports work was definitely my dad. And and so there was kind of a split that was happening internally around, is this my work or not?
right. You want to be there for your family and be there for yourself. So now that you have all this knowledge and you're able to help others through your business, how do you feel?
So I spent the first 2 years really saying yes to everything, and then the second 2 years releasing everything, and last year really coming into, like, a recalibration and integration around what is mine, what's my work in the world. I have 2 boys, I have a 16-year-old and I have an 8-year-old, and we decided that our 8-year-old really is thriving being homeschooled, and so we decided to have him be home. So I am homeschooling and we unschool. So I don't use curriculum, and we're really looking at following his interests and allowing that to navigate his unfolding. And so I would say I struggle now with a similar layer or flavor of space.
Mhm.
Space, I think, is my work in this world. It's expanding my capacity to hold all the pieces and create the spaces for myself. I've really had to be intentional about claiming the space. So I really had to set some boundaries with myself within claiming space so that I could find the balance that I needed given the shift in the dynamic at home and being on more and not having, full 6-hour stretches of alone time. This is where we change. When we as the adults are working on our own stuff, it has this huge vibrational effect on our families without needing them to be any different. Our energy that we're emanating because we're feeling a certain way in our systems has an amazing influence on those who are around us.
Hmm. It's so true. And I feel like when we can make the space, if everyone gave themselves the space to heal themselves, to think in peace and quiet, and really the world would be such a better place because everyone's more in touch with themselves and what they need instead of this go, 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 go that society has us running this
Right.
hamster wheel. Yeah.
Absolutely. And then we get overwhelmed, and then we're operating from overwhelm, which we're more reactive and we're going to get into more conflict, or we're not going to have access to our highest functioning brain power. That's the thing. When we're stuck in an autopilot and overdrive or anxiety activation, stress state, we don't have access to our full capability of problem solving and all the things. So the more space and time that I claim for myself makes me a better mom, makes me more productive. If I'm not carving in that time, I'm not going to be as efficient and productive in my work.
Mhm.
And for those of you who are listening who are saying, "Oh, you're creating space." Okay, I know that it's not an easy thing to do. And so for me, my game becomes, how do I weave it in? Where do I weave in these moments that become mine? So it's like every time I get in the car, even if my son's in the background, we've got the music on and we're singing.
Yep.
Like, and that's like, I get my expression. I lost that. I don't drive him to school anymore. I lost my alone time singing in the car. And so that is a way that, like, I know that we get in the car and we both jam out to the tunes and I get a little bit of release. Like, that gets to be for me too. Right. So it's finding these really teeny tiny ways of, can I take a breath before I do the dishes? Can I go outside and just stick my feet in the grass for 30 seconds? And take a nice breath and exhale, and then step back into the schedule, so to speak.
It's the little things like the grass,
Yes.
and you're right. That's
Yeah.
excellent advice for anyone because you're not productive, and a lot of our listeners are listening because they want to transition to a
Yeah.
happier part of their lives. So just to think about carving that space, making that space so that you can even think about what it is you really wanna do.
Right. Right. I mean, my other sacred space, and you get to laugh, is the bathroom.
I
I
know.
mean, like an extra 5 minutes, I'll sit, I'll take that long shower. Like, that gets to be the space that's mine, where I'm feeling into my body and feeling into even my needs, because so much of my learning was, I didn't even know what I needed. I didn't even know what I wanted. It's just been such a interesting exploration of coming into these new experiences and being able to create the space in order to even feel into that.
Who are the people that come to see you for coaching and for guidance?
I work with lots of different kinds of people. So I am still doing the sports work. So I do still work with athletes who have blocks or fears. I also work a lot with performers who have blocks or fears. So a lot of singers tend to come through, actors, being on the stage, those kinds of people. Then I work a lot with entrepreneurs or those transitioning into work who feel overwhelmed. I work a lot with entrepreneurs who have fear of visibility. So fear in general, and sort of, why does my body feel like I'm going to throw up every time I go to a podcast interview or I try to go live on Facebook? I find that people find me who have a higher level of visibility faster than their nervous systems kind of were ready for. So someone who really exploded in their career very, very quickly. And so now they're sort of like incongruence with what's showing up in the body. I work a lot with couples who are wanting help and support in their relationship dynamics. We do a lot of teaching around how to identify, like, what's going on in your nervous system, what's going on in your partner's nervous system, and how to really come from a compassionate communication place and understanding. And I do some dream work. So I'm bringing my little witchy woo woo piece into. So yeah, so I'm working in all of these different flavors and threads, and that works for me. I love that. And I talk about myself being like a multi-dimensional guide. And there we have all of these layers and all of these pieces. I go by lots of labels. So well, definitely peak performance coach. And I'm also a level 2 melt method instructor, which is a modality that works with these soft foam rollers and helps your connective tissue system. It's a companion to my nervous system work with people. It's a way to really help people's bodies who are in chronic pain or holding a lot of stress and tension and can't kind of unwind that. And so I work with that with my athletes, but also just regular humans. So I sort of have that lane, which is almost like its own animal, that peak performance coaching business. And then, yeah, I call myself a somatic experiencing practitioner, multidimensional guide, and intuitive healer. And that's my mouthful.
That is a mouthful, but it is. You're really touching so many different types of people. So your clientele is very vast,
Yes.
and that's great. So you can kind
Yeah.
of have the athlete performer piece and then just me and
Yeah.
my
Busy
friends.
humans. Yeah.
Exactly. And I
Yeah.
can't help but think about what a nice connection this is to your work in the high school.
Yes.
Because in the high school, you're counseling people, you're helping them with the direction that they want to go. And you're doing the same thing now in just a different way.
And I'm so grateful for all the steps on my journey because I couldn't have just gone into what I'm doing now. Those 5 years at the school really gave me a sense of systems and dynamics. And I worked a lot with families and a lot with different kinds of parts and players. And in coaching, particularly because I work with adults, but I also work a lot with teens in athletes, but also just stressed out over scheduled college students and high schoolers.
So are you so happy now? Can you imagine your world if you did not make this transition?
I cannot. I just can't.
No.
I just can't. I'd still be really sick. And the interesting thing is I took the time to heal and went to all the doctors and then did a lot of somatic healing work and ancestral healing work in my own system. I resolved those autoimmune issues on my own. All these different doctors wanted to give me lots of different medicines for all the different things that they were saying weren't connected. And the body is an organism that's a whole organism and everything influences everything else. So for me, I really doubled down on my own eating and how I was taking care of myself. So I can't imagine, I just can't imagine it any other way.
That's wonderful to hear. That really is. And it's so interesting too that you got yourself better and now you're able to help other people. So it's like
Yeah.
you really can speak to it, not just like, oh, this is what you're supposed to do because this is what I studied. No, you
Right.
studied and applied it to yourself. Also, you have courses, you are an author of 4 books.
Those are sports books. So those are for athletes. So if anybody listening has gymnasts, divers, cheerleaders, or figure skaters, the book is called Embody Confident 30 Days of Radical Mindset Shifts for gymnasts, divers, cheerleaders, or figure skaters. I hired a book coach to start to do content inventory for me of everything that I had written because there was so much. My book coach said that the first book's always the pancake, that first pancake that comes out. Yes, a little brown on the sides, a little crispy. So we picked the sport uh to to start because I had written a lot of things already and she helped me compile that into these creations. So that's what I spent a lot of last year working on and working towards. And then the beautiful thing for me is like now it's out of my brain. And my brain has now unleashed this other creative channel of my dream work and the couples work and the witchier connection to spirit and quantum healing and all these pieces that really jazz and light me up that I get to focus on now.
All right, it's time for our 5 fast cues of the week. Here we go. Name one thing that these different chapters in your life have taught you.
The importance of listening to your body and honoring your body and your own timing and rhythms. That has been my biggest lesson in all of this.
Would you recommend taking a leap into a big life change to your best friend?
Yes, absolutely. with asking for help and support. And I think that there are, some people who just dive in and there's nothing that's supporting, and that can be very overwhelming. And then they go back and try to find another job again or those things. So setting it up in a way for yourself so that it's easy to say yes.
What is one piece of advice that you would give to someone trying to start a second act?
There is no wrong way to do it.
Just do it.
Yeah, like you get to do it in your own way. For a while at the beginning of my business, I thought it was supposed to be a certain way. And I thought I was supposed to be on all these boards and do all these things and say yes to everybody, and had a lot of guilt about saying no. And I had to learn how to start to say no. And there are really no mistakes. I guess the other piece to that for me is to trust your own timing, because I think that we can feel urgent when we're stepping into a new chapter. And there is a natural timing that our body has on lots of different levels. So there are always these little timing nudges and winks from the universe that we can start to follow. And so it's trusting in your own timing and how you feel called to be doing it.
I like that. Timing is so key if you can follow it and really listen. What does the next chapter look like for you?
So I am in a chapter of following threads that light me up so I can see what's being sort of woven. I don't necessarily feel like I know what that is yet, but I'm letting myself be in that unknown and be in all of these creative ways that I just am really getting jazzed up about. And I love being in conversations and talking and yeah, all of the different pieces. So following thread.
So, where can our audience connect with you?
I have two websites for any athletes or performers. That's peakperformwithsara.com. And Sarah doesn't have an H, so it's just SARA. And my website for Soma Synthesis Studios, which my space is for healing, integration, and expansion, that's saravatore.com. And then I'm also on Instagram at sarah.vatore and on Facebook at Expand Your Capacity.
This was such an enlightening conversation. Honestly, I've loved to hear about your journey and to see you in such a happy space. I feel like you could help so many people kind of get to the happiness that you're in right now. Reach out to Sara. She can help you find your space and really become the person that you are meant to be.
Yeah, thank you.
My special thanks to Sara for sharing her career journey with us. She has so much on her plate, and it's incredible to see how grounded she is in balancing it all. Be sure to take a listen to Sara's new podcast called Multidimensional Transmissions wherever you listen. For more on Sara, go to saravatore.com. That's SARAVATORE.com. As always, my hope is that you snag some inspiration from this episode that you can carry with you into your day. Remember, wherever you are on your career journey, you are right where you're supposed to be. So keep trekking along on your path, and I will meet you back here next time on a new episode of the Second Act Success podcast. Talk soon, my friend. Thank you for joining us. I hope you found some gems of inspiration and some takeaways to help you on your path to Second Act Success. To view show notes from this episode, visit secondactsuccess.co. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss a single episode. Reviews only take a few moments, and they really do mean so much. Thank you again for listening. I'm Shannon Russell, and this is Second Act Success.